Cam Heyward ain't having it. That's what he said on his newest podcast about recent rankings that include him. And there's a lot of talk that he's given that should get Pittsburgh Steelers fans excited about this season. We'll talk about what Cam said recently and tie that into how it relates to him as a leader on the team. I'm Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast with my friend and guest, Jenna Harner. We'll talk about everything on that right here. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. If you're watching this video on YouTube, hit the like button on this video if you enjoyed. Hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our breaking news content. Joining me today, as we always have on Fridays, it's Jenna Harner from Channel 11 WPXI. Jenna, what is up?
Chris, happy Friday.
Happy
Good
Friday.
Vibes. We're in the summer. I keep wanting to count down to Steelers training camp, and that's not the case. But, hey, we're getting there.
Look, we're getting there. I mean, we're less than 2 weeks. Oh, what's up, Zeke? That's Zeke. If you're watching on video, he's sneaking. Zeke's a camera hog. He did this last week too. He likes to get on the show. It's okay.
I get it.
Zeke has takes on the Steelers secondary that he wants to talk about who should be starting at cornerback. But I wanted today to take some time to talk about Cam Heyward in the media. Now, Cam Heyward. We'll put this out there. Steelers fans, and love him. Great player. Definitely, the leader of this team right now, the face, I'd say, even so. But Cam Heyward's made a consistent effort to be more in media in recent years, especially this past year. He's been doing more ESPN interviews. He now has a new show called Not Just Football, or is I maybe messing that up there? What's this thing called? It's Not Just Football. Yeah. With Peyton Manning's media company that he started up. But he's venturing into media because he knows, hey, I'm in my 30s. I only got so many more years of being an NFL superstar or defensive tackle before I got to move on. So that's part of what's going on here. But he's been he's been more open about what he thinks about things and how he, and how he perceives things. And a recent, surveyed list of, where ESPN's Jeremy Fowler does. We talked about the recent list with the wide receivers on yesterday's episode, but they did a defensive tackles list and it ranked Cam Heyward as 5th, and Cam wasn't having it. He even called his inaugural episode of Not Just Football, "Damn, this is wrong." Just talking about it on the episode, but. Jenna, I see this, and we've heard this before. He posted "Don't poke the bear" when he felt people were dissing him all last year. Anytime we said, Cam, what's it like being one of the older? If you said those 3 letters, OLD, Cam looked at you like, "What you saying? What you saying with that?"
Yep.
This is an interesting motivation for this guy to not just be this playmaker, but to prove everyone wrong about himself. But a lot of this seems like it's something that can build up the identity of what he is as a leader for the Steelers and how other Steelers can kind of fall in line with, they're dissing our guy over here and they're dissing us too.
Yeah, no, who was it last year? I'm trying to remember that when it was one of the Sunday night games that came out and Cam was on the poster, or someone was like, "Oh, who's 97?" Who was that?
Warren Sapp. You are right. Warren Sapp said, "Who's 97?" Yeah.
Yep. And we all remember how Cam reacted, as he should have, because of what he did for that defense. This, what he does consistently, but especially what he did last year when the defense struggled. I just can't get over. I vividly remember the Chargers game where Cam Heyward was the one making the tackle, charging downfield and bringing Justin Herbert down there.
Chasing down Justin Herbert and just running past people this man doesn't stop. His motor is just he's like the Energizer Bunny, but fast. He just keeps going. It's ridiculous. But this is who he is, Jen. It's what you were talking about. I think a lot of this goes into the heart of why the Steelers love him and why the Steelers, like Mike Tomlin said, or Cam Heyward said, I'm putting my locker right next to Kenny Pickett. The Steelers, they want everyone to identify and be or have the spirit of a Cam Heyward.
Absolutely. And we talk about kind of who are the types of guys in the locker room that consistently demonstrate what it means to be a Steeler, demonstrate the Steeler way, how you're supposed to act, how you're supposed to carry yourself, all the types of things that, make the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Cam Heyward is kind of like the perfect example for that. Just the way he carries himself, the leader that he is, what he does for this team, his work ethic. Like if you look around that locker room in terms of guys that you want your younger guys on the team to model their game, model their style of play, model who they are as an NFL player after, I think Cam Heyward is probably going to be one or two of your top options in that locker room, just based on what he does for the team and what he does with himself. And how, again, I feel like I keep saying how he carries himself, but it really is so true. The way he's so involved in the community, the type of player he is. He's not somebody that's going to be like, all right, we're giving up, we're down by 20. Like if this Steelers team is down 3 touchdowns, he's still coming out with the same intensity as if it was a tie game and they, were trying to stop the other team from having the game winning drive. Like he is the epitome, I think, of what it means to be a Steeler. And so for him, when he gets slighted like this, when he gets a little bit disrespected, you see it. And it's for him, he uses it as like a huge sense of motivation too. He's like, all right, you think I'm, I'm number 5 and not number 1. Like I'm going to go out there and prove you wrong. And I understand having Aaron Donald ranked 1 on that list. That's
totally really no complaints here.
No, but I think Cam Heyward would tell you he's top 3 for sure.
I want to get to the comparison of all these players in the next segment, but going back to this, it does seem like Cam Heyward. I've always, ever since I've lived in Pittsburgh all my life, I've always felt like there are guys who you could call a Mr. Steeler, a person who was a very good player, maybe not a superstar, but embodied what it meant to be a Steeler. We're talking about guys like Hayward, guys like Troy Polamalu, Heath Miller, guys that they may not have been the best of the best at their position, but they were highly respected. They carried themselves with class. They always showed up with their lunch pail and they went to work. And and they were tough. You always, because that's the other thing. You can't be a diva and be a Mr. Steeler. Like as great as Antonio Brown was, even before we knew about all the crazy stuff, he still wasn't Mr. Steeler because he was tough. But like there's got to be some boom to what you bring there. And like Hayward, he blocked people. He blocked the snot out of people. That gave him that. Cam is Mr. Steeler right now. He carries that flag. And so I think it's a thing where he's looking at like, not only you dissing me when you put me as the number 5 defensive tackle in the NFL, you're dissing this whole defense and this whole team because I do represent what this is about.
That's absolutely what it is. He takes it personally, but he also takes it personally for his guys around him and his defensive unit. And he knows that a lot of people have kind of written the Steelers off, especially written the Steelers defense off with the way that their run game was last year. And with, some of the things, the gaps that we saw last year that weren't consistent with this elite defense of Steelers past. But he takes it personally. And this is something for him where he's like, you know what? All right, you're saying this. And then he posts to Twitter, don't poke the bear. Because he's like, all right, you did this. I'm going to go out there and show you. I would expect, because you expect this from Cam Heyward anyway, but I would expect him, especially week 1, to just come out guns blazing. He wants to make an impact. He wants to say, hey, this is who we are. And also, what better team to do it against than the defending AFC champs?
Yeah, that would be a crazy way. If he goes out there, he's sacking Joe Burrow, and the defense is making a statement. That I think that'll be like everyone like, oh wait, what happened there? Like kind of like how when the Steelers beat the Bills last year. That was everyone was like, wait, how did that happen? But and
hold on,
I think it's gonna be really interesting. But let's take a step back and look at who those top 5 players were, the 4 players that were ranked above him on this list, where Cam Heyward is in the NFL. We'll do that in just a second and rate that also with the rest of the Steelers defense and how it builds off of Cam Heyward's placing there. We'll do that in just a second here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, I got to talk to you guys about Built Bar. Now, y'all know about Built Bar. They're the healthy protein bars that taste like candy bars. They're covered in 100% chocolate, and they have so many different flavors that are amazing. Their latest one is called Coconut Brownie Chunk Puff. That's right. The Coconut Brownie Chunk Puff flavor is something that you're going to love because it's deliciously chewy. It's a deliciously chewy marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate, and it's like a fluffy cloud of coconut brownie goodness. But stop drooling and listen. They're good for you too because they're low in calorie, low in sugar, and high in protein while still being delicious. The coconut brownie chunk puffs are only here for a limited time. So you want to go to built.com right now and make sure that you don't miss out, because they are going fast and they taste amazing. All Built Bars are made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. Eat something that tastes good and is good for you by checking out Built Bars and Built Puffs, especially the coconut brownie chunk puffs. So go to built.com right now. Use that promo code LOCKED15. That's LOCKED 15 LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your next order when you visit built.com. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm Chris Carter. She's Jenna Harner. We're talking about Cam Heyward and his disdain towards the rankings that don't make him a top 3 defensive tackle in the NFL. And here's the thing. Cam will say, hey, I'm the number 1 guy. I think everyone in Pittsburgh would be like, hey, Aaron Donald. All right, like, we ain't mad at that one. But so the players that were rated above him, Aaron Donald was number 1, Jeffrey Simmons at number 2, and that's interesting because he's 24 years old. Last year he wasn't even in the top 10 when ESPN did these rankings. Number 3 was Chris Jones, well-known sack man for the Kansas City Chiefs, big name player there. DeForest Buckner, 28 years old, been around a bit. Last year was number 8 in the top 10. He's ranked at number 4 for the Indianapolis Colts, and then comes Cam Heyward at 5. You also had Kenny Clark for the Packers at 6, Vita Vea at 7 for the Buccaneers, Arik Armstead at 8 for the Niners, Grady Jarrett for the Falcons at 9, and Jonathan Allen for the Commanders at 10. I also think it would have been interesting where Stephon Tuitt might have ranked if he was able to play right now, because I think he would have been in that conversation. But that being said, looking at where these top 5 guys are, just dealing with them, I went through and I compared their career, their numbers over the last 3 years, because that's when Jeffrey Simmons was drafted. So that's when all of them have been in the league together. If you look at their rates of how things are go, Cam Heyward does have the highest rate of tackles per game with 2.8 solo tackles and 1.9 assisted tackles per game. That's higher than any of the other guys there. Now, Cam Heyward does come in 3rd when it comes to sacks. He's behind Aaron Donald's 0.8 sacks per game and Chris Jones' 0.6 sacks per game. But again, 3rd amongst the top 5, and in tackles, in both solos and assisted tackles, he is number 1 in both categories. I think it's also interesting. He's the only player of these guys in the last 3 years to intercept a pass, let alone 2 passes like he has. Jenna, I think that Cam Heyward's bigger than his stats, though, because like you said, it's not just when he's making the tackle and he's blowing things up. It's the spirit of what he's doing. It's getting everyone behind him. And I'll never forget Titans game when they're when they get that 4th down stop and Joe Hayden made that tackle and they're doing the measurement and you see Cam's right up on the ball, and when he's yelling short and they're like, we got this, we did this, just the energy that people take in following him. And you talked about how even when they're down 3 touchdowns in that Chargers game, they were down a lot and you still saw him never giving up.
No.
That to me, I know that these rankings are probably taking into account more stats and on-field stuff. That to me adds to it. If you're a leader and you're doing this type of stuff, you're a better player because of it, and you're more valuable, at least to me.
Oh, absolutely. Not to mention what it does for the rest of your defensive unit, what it does for the rest of the defensive line, what it does for the linebackers, what it does for the secondary, like what it does for all of the guys around him, because he raises his level personally, but he also raises the level of all of his teammates because of that energy, because of the way he demonstrates how he goes out there and just the way that he carries himself, the way that he plays the game of football, the tenacity he has, the toughness, but at the same time, the leadership, or, obviously leadership, but like the respect and the sportsmanship. I think that's also such a crucial part. But to me, just like watching him, and stat wise too, we can look at the fact that he is 3rd among those guys in sacks the last 3 years when you have TJ Watt on your football team.
Yeah.
Like that's something I feel like that needs to be taken into consideration too there.
You're absolutely right. TJ Watt just tied the NFL sack record last year. So some may say that that's an advantage. Some may say that, hey, well, they were paying more attention to TJ Watt. Well, no, because TJ Watt was also getting more sacks than Cam Heyward in each and every one of those years. So he was having to kind of race to the quarterback to beat TJ Watt. And For the past 5 years in the NFL, the Steelers have led the NFL in sacks, and Cam Heyward's been a huge part of that. Even when he's not the guy who's necessarily tallying the sack, he requires a double team most times, because if you don't, he's probably beaten your gun unless you're Quentin Nelson. And even Quentin Nelson, he actually ragdolled Quentin Nelson the last time they played the Colts a few times. Yep. Even in that, he's a guy you have to pay a lot of attention to. And again, I'm not saying anything bad about Chris Jones, DeForest Buckner, Jeffrey Simmons, all those guys. They're talented, but to me, nobody carries their team's flag the way Cam Heyward does, and he's every bit as good as them against the run and against the pass, and I think even better when you look at how he contributes in different ways in those situations.
Oh, absolutely. And you and I were talking before we started recording, but his pass breakups, like that to me is such a crucial part of his game. And he's so disruptive when it comes to that. I mean, we see it not only on game days, but we see it when they're practicing. Like, I feel like he has at least one batted ball, like a practice minimum.
Oh, he definitely, at least in practices, he's always getting his hand on him.
Yeah, he's such a ball hawk too. And I think that goes a long way in terms of just his overall game. Like, he's not just this one-dimensional, two-dimensional guy. He brings so many facets to what he does, not to mention making everybody else around him better and say, hey, this is how we play. This is what we do. This is how we're going to do it. And you're getting in the boat and you're rowing no matter what.
Exactly. And to your point, Cam Heyward batted 9 passes last year. Oh my gosh. And again, he's a defensive tackle. Yeah. Like, he's just, and he batted 9 last year, 3 the year before that, 6 the year before that. He has had at least 3 or more batted passes in a season every year going back to 2016.
Wow.
That is how dominant he is. That is how he's, even when, hey, I may not get to you. I may not get the sack, but I'm going to still put my hands up. So this is a guy who last year had almost double-digit pass breakups, had double-digit sacks, 89 total tackles all put together. And I get it. He was an AP, first team AP, Associated Press, all team, all pro. Like he is that guy. For me, I get why he's slighted. But again, tying this back to the rest of the defense, this is a team where TJ Watt, who was ranked as the number 1 edge rusher by ESPN, you got TJ Watt, Minkah Fitzpatrick, who was ranked as the number 2 safety in those same lists. And then you still have a lot of role players like Cameron Sutton, Akella Witherspoon, Levi Wallace. Devin Bush is going to be back in the fold, and they're talking about him being better. Miles Jack, who was added, and then on the defensive line, even Tyson Alualu being healthy. They're excited for Chris Wormley. They added Ogunjobi. DeMarvin Leal is a new guy there. Alex Highsmith had I think he had 7 sacks last year, as did Chris Wormley. This is a defense with so many parts to it that Cam Heyward could play if he plays at this level again. It's they could come at you with so many different things if they're healthy, because that's been the problem of late, is that they haven't been healthy. But if they're coming at you again with Cam Heyward playing at the level he is, and all these guys still playing at their level or taking steps forward, I think it's going to force the conversation to say, all right, we have to give Cam the respect, because not only is he this really great defensive tackle, but he's the face and the leader of this defense that's kicking everyone's butts. Now, I think this might have played a huge factor, is that the Steelers did rank last against the run, and Cam was there for all of that. So maybe when this lace was being done, that's factored in. But if that's fixed this year, I think that goes away.
Oh, I absolutely think so. I think then we're talking about Cam Heyward being in the top 3, maybe even second. Again, I see Aaron Donald as that true number 1 guy. And I think a lot of Pittsburgh fans, honestly, you said it perfectly. Like, Cam would say himself he's number 1, but I think he'd also be like, all right, yeah, AD's pretty good too in that sense. But I think that could be a very realistic conversation, depending on what the Steelers defense looks like this year in terms of the adjustments they make compared to what they were doing last season.
Absolutely. The Steelers defense has a chance to be truly special this year. And I think that Cam Heyward being angry is only going to help the situation, because he's going to be that much more motivated. And not that he's never not motivated, but I think that adds a little more fire in there, and the thing is, Cam Heyward, his fire ain't just for him. he passes it out to the rest of the team. He's like, they're talking about y'all too when they diss us. So I think that's a big factor in this. Cam Heyward also had something to say about the offense, though. So I want to get to that in just a second here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, we got to talk to you guys about betonline.net. Betonline.net is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports information. You can find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's the Major League Baseball season, which is well underway. And I know, hey, if you're a sports fan, I miss the days when there was basketball and hockey and football and college and all this stuff going on, and you're bored because it's one major sport out there. Well, one way to help you get through that is putting money down on baseball. It's not just who wins the games, it's who scores. The home run derby's coming up. You can have fun putting money down on that. Go to betonline.net. It has all the odds, all the contests, everything that you could want to know to help you make money on those contests and have fun while you're doing it. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting, playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today and use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action when you visit BetOnline, where the game starts. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm Chris Carter with Jenna Harner, breaking things down on your Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, as I was just saying, Cam Heyward in his podcast, he was talking about things that he looks forward to in training camp. One aspect that I think is pretty cool is that he talked about, hey, he's excited to see how these new quarterbacks perform with pressure in their face. And talking about, of course, Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett, because he's seen Mason Rudolph. He knows what Mason has to offer. But all through OTAs, minicamp, all those things, when those guys are throwing touchdowns and the scrimmages and everything, there is a competitive nature. Like, when you watch the Steelers practice, and it's less than it used to be. Like, Jenna, like right before you came to town, there used to be a lot more fights at Steelers training camp between the offense and the defense. And Cam would even instigate some of them because he's like, I'm gonna make it so that everyone's competitive out here. I think they're more friendly now, but there's still that sense of like, hey, the defense wants to win more of these. And I think he's excited to kind of be the challenge to get in the face of his quarterbacks and be like, hey, you want to be the leader? You want to be the guy? You got to prove it against this defense. And if you prove it against this defense, you could prove it against any defense. I kind of like the way he's approaching that.
I do too. And it's funny because he talks about, the excitement of seeing them face pressure. Well, he's excited to partake in that. He's excited to be the one, like you're saying, creating that pressure, because he wants to see how his guys are going to do. There's so much talk surrounding this team. And as much as the guys tell us, we block out the noise, blah, 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 they know the storylines. They know that there is going to be a very real open quarterbacks competition at training camp this year. So for him, he's like, I want to make these guys better, but also I want to go out there and say, all right, you think you're, going to be that number one guy? You have to go against us every day. You have to prove it against us, and we are not going to make your job easy.
Right. And I think that's a big part of it it's the whole iron sharpens iron thing that everyone always says. Mike Tomlin says it all the time. It's not just his, but it's a mantra that's been out there. But I think Cam's excited to see that, because it's also, a big reason that they're excited about, the quarterback situation this year, despite losing Ben Roethlisberger, is they're going to get mobile guys who aren't afraid to use their feet. Kenny Pickett stole the entire national spotlight last year with the fake slide play, in the ACC championship, which still to this day is one of the most amazing plays I've ever seen live. Like, I've covered live and I've been like, holy crap, that really just happened. Not that he could do the fake slide, because that's illegal in the NFL. And it's now illegal in college football as well. But him and Mitchell Trubisky are guys who can get up and get out on defenses. And if you're getting up and getting out, not that the Steelers would light them up, but it's important to have the pads on and understand, like, hey, when you do that, you better be ready to take a shot and keep it moving and to protect yourself, because you can't just do that recklessly and take shots and then be out of the game, because then what good are you at that point? I think Cam's I'm really intrigued to see how he handles this training camp as the veteran leader who's going to be like, hey guys, let's set this temperament, but let's push them. Just don't push them to the point that we break these guys before the season starts.
And because so many of these guys, especially on the defense, have not been a part of this team, I don't think anybody have been a part of this team when they've had a quarterbacks competition. Am I right?
There hasn't nobody. I mean, the last time there was a Steelers quarterback competition was 2004 when Ben Roethlisberger was drafted. So most of those guys were in high school back then.
I had to make sure because God knows I'd be forgetting about somebody. So, but like I wanted to cover all my bases there and just basically, I need to just be more emphatic with what I'm saying because I know I'm right and then I double guess it.
You know you're right.
I know I'm right. There was no one on this defense on the team the last time there was a quarterback competition. So for these guys, they're like, all right, like they have a chance to prove themselves, and that's what everybody's gonna be talking about. But we want everybody to be talking about the fact that they did their best and tried to prove it against us, but we stopped them. Like there's such that sense of, you mentioned before, that competition in practice, that pride of, hey, we as a defense beat them as an offense, or vice versa. We hear guys in the locker room just talk about, we beat them today, they beat us today. We love that. But for the defense, I think there's that real pride, especially with knowing that so many people have talked down on this defense recently and said, oh, is the Steelers defense still elite? They have these guys, they've dropped the last handful of years compared to where they've been, which, to each their own type thing. But I think this defense is also ready to prove like, all right, like we have a lot to be too. So when they're going to go up against us in practice, when everyone's talking about, oh, how'd Mitch Trubisky look versus how Kenny Pickett look, the defense is going to be like, we made them look this way. We did this against them. And I think that's going to be one of the most fun parts about training camp is seeing how they react to it. Not to mention the fact that a lot of these, the last handful of years in terms of Ben Roethlisberger's mobility, the defense in practice didn't see a whole ton of, crazy movement that we might see with the Matt Canada offense coming into this year too. So for them, it's as much of a challenge, I think, coming into, hey, how are we going to go defend this offense versus the offense being like, hey, how are we going to look? What's our identity going to be?
I agree. And one thing, though, is the crazy part is you're right. Ben Roethlisberger can't do that for him. The scout team quarterback, whether sometimes they would put Ray McLeod in and let him run around and do that. But, it's interesting to see that, but they've still been very efficient in handling quarterbacks like that without having a starting quarterback that plays in that manner. Like Lamar Jackson.
With what they can do against, they've
contained him. Like, they haven't completely destroyed him every time. He still makes his plays, but he has never crushed them in a game. And in fact, I think he's only beaten Ben Roethlisberger. He only beat Ben Roethlisberger one time in his career. Or no, he didn't. He never beat Ben Roethlisberger.
He never did. I was doing the math there. I'm like, wait a second, I don't know. Yeah,
because I think the only time he's beaten the Steelers was the game when Mason Rudolph got knocked out on the field and Devlin Hodges had to come in, and then Juju fumbled in overtime. I think it's the only time he's beaten the Steelers as the starting quarterback. And I think that's remarkable for but that shows the Steelers, they find ways to do that. Now you get quarterbacks that get to face off against defenses that are used to playing off against that. I think that's a huge factor for maybe accelerating the growth of some of these quarterbacks, because again, this is a legit quarterback competition. I still see Mitch Trubisky as the starter. I think it's just but we're going to see, how does Kenny Pickett respond to certain adversity in training camp? How does he handle that? How does Mason Rudolph handle being a guy with a young kid that's behind him and growing into the system, and Mitch Trubisky was brought in to replace him essentially. How does he handle that? All of that, I think, plays into a very interesting training camp that I think will be a good proving ground for both the defense and the offense.
And there's no doubt we are going to hear some wonderful Cam Heyward chirps.
Oh my gosh, he chirps everybody.
He even chirps us half the time.
He does.
Cam Heyward.
He be saying, yeah, right about that. I'm like, what? Cam, calm down. Like, don't fight me. Listen. If Cam ever fight me, I'd be running. I'm not sure if I'd get away from Cam Heyward because he's still pretty quick. But he does chirp, and that's the other thing. He has made it a point to pick a scrap with at least one offensive lineman every year. Last year, he picked on Kendrick Green, and I think it got to the point where Kendrick Green took it personally, and he didn't realize, like, hey, this is just what he does to everybody. Yep. But I think it's just, again, that competitive nature. He wants to see when you're backed into a corner, when the chips are down, when you got to represent yourself, how do you handle yourself in that moment? Because it's a physical game. Those moments happen all the time when someone pushes your buttons or is too physical or does cross the line, and you have to not only defend yourself, but defend yourself in a way that doesn't compromise the team. Yes. And Cam Heyward's unofficially been that guy at practice, especially for the offensive and defensive linemen.
Absolutely. For him, he demonstrates hey, this is how you act when your back's against the wall, when you're facing probably the most adversity you faced in your athletic career up to this point. How do you handle yourself? What do you do? And he's such a good example of that, but also the way that he does that, the way that he kind of like gets, I don't want to say gets under the young guy's skin early, because that's not entirely it, but the way he kind of is like, all right, like, I'm gonna, I'm not gonna make this easy on you. I think that also he knows it's gonna build these guys and make them better for years to come.
Absolutely. We'll see how he builds and makes them better. And meanwhile, we'll see if poking the bear is a good idea for anyone outside the Steelers organization that has to go up against Cam Heyward. I don't think it's a good idea for them. But hey, Steelers fans, I think it's a good thing for y'all. So do be watching for that. Jenna, thanks so much for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on anytime we get the chance. Let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
It is always my favorite place to be on a Friday. So glad to be here. You can find me on Twitter at Jenna Harner11, Instagram at Jenna_Harner, and locally here in Pittsburgh on WPXI Channel 11.
Absolutely. Do check her out at Channel 11. Jenna, don't you and I have another show to do this weekend?
Oh, that's right. We're both going to be on the Final Word.
Whoop. She's just doing the hip hop horns. I do have the hip hop horn app on my phone to do it at times. Hold on. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick. I have way too many apps. But hold on, it's green. At least it used to be green. There it is. Yeah, we got the hip hop horn. There we go. But point being, Jen and I will be panelists together on the Final Word. So we're going to be chopping it up about some Evgeny Malkin and everything else going on in Pittsburgh sports and with the home run derby and all the all-star stuff. So do check out Final Word this weekend on Channel 11. It's awesome. Thanks so much, Jenna, for coming on the show. Thank you, dear listeners and viewers, for checking out the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at SteelersNow.com. Listen to this show and watch this show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. Rate this show 5 stars with a positive comment on Apple, and you'll get a special shout out at the end of the show. Thanks again, everyone. Have great weekends. Be back on your screens and in your ears on Monday.